There are some incredibly powerful items in Risk of Rain 2. You've got things like Clover and spare drone parts, the Irradiant Pearl, the Perforators, or I guess now you got Sauteed Worms, which are just even better than the Perforators, Safer Spaces, Shrimp, Polyloot, and the Recycler. And heck, I guess even Sailstar can be thrown in there. These are all incredibly powerful items, but none of them are as truly game-breaking as Transcendence. This single item is so strong that it absolutely butchers any challenge one could have, especially in Eclipse. Transcendence is a lunar item, a unique tier of item that you don't acquire through gold. Rather, you obtain them with lunar coins, a currency that remains between runs. Lunar items are known for having powerful positive effects whilst also coming with negatives. Doubling your damage but having your health, replacing an entire skill with a new one but removing your old skill, cutting your equipment cooldown in half but automatically using it. Okay, that one's pretty positive for the most part. But what does Transcendence do, and why is it so game-breaking? Well, its description doesn't really help that much. Convert all of your health into shield, increase maximum health. The positive is obviously the max health increase, so the negative must be converting all your health into shield, right? But that's also a positive. Shield in almost every case is easier to manage and better than health. For those who don't know how shield works, it's very simple. Every time you take damage, a 7-second timer starts, and after this timer is up, all shield will begin to regen over a 2-second period. So after 9 seconds of not taking damage, you get all of your shield back no matter what. You don't need any form of healing or anything. All you need to do is dodge. This alone is incredibly powerful, but the fact that you also get a 50% HP boost, the second highest HP boost in the game, only beaten by Stone Flux Pauldron, an item with an actual negative, is just ridiculous. Now, it might sound like I'm over-exaggerating a tad here. It boosts your HP and makes it shield. How is that game-breaking? Well, there's a lot more under the hood than that simple explanation. First things first, this description lies to you. Transcendence doesn't convert all your health, it converts all but one of your health. Yep, you have 1 HP and the remainder of your health bar is shield. This is important because a lot of the game's mechanics scale off of your HP, the biggest of these being fall damage. Fall damage is calculated based on your momentum and health, and because you have 1 HP, this means that no matter how far you fall, you will take 1 damage. That is it. This item is effectively fall damage immunity on every single survivor in the game, an entire Eclipse modifier completely ignored because of a single item. But that's not all. Some survivors have skills that scale off of HP. Seeker's Sojourn is a skill that lasts forever, but deals damage the longer you stay in it, even cutting off all your healing if you're in it for too long. But grab 1 Transcendence, and now this entire song and dance you need to look out for with Sojourn can just be completely ignored. Heretic is another character, having a negative health regen that you need to pay attention to and make sure you heal off. Not with Transcendence though, you can completely ignore that entire part of her kit. None of these things feel intentional, and it only happens because Transcendence sets your health to 1. But that's not all that Transcendence ignores. What if I told you that this single item lets you skip an entire part of your itemization, and lets you ignore the effects of almost 30 entire items? Because you convert all your HP into shield, healing just doesn't matter anymore, and every single healing based item now does nothing. Every single item that I have on screen right now does literally nothing once you acquire Transcendence, and all of these items lose a large amount of their value. So what do you do with these items now? It's simple, you scrap them. Because you're able to ignore these items, you can now print those into damaging items, which lets you become significantly stronger in every single run. But that's not the only healing thing this ignores. You know these Malachite enemies, some of the most threatening elites in the game? Well, the anti-healing effect that the Malachite enemies apply to you does nothing. You can just ignore it. Speaking of ignoring things, let's take another look at Eclipse with 2 more modifiers this time. Eclipse 1 sets your HP to 50% upon spawning into the stage. You normally need to play it kinda safe, and use healing items to quickly heal that off, but with Transcendence, this entire modifier is ignored. This is nowhere near as egregious as Eclipse 5, however, which cuts all healing by 50%, except this does nothing to shield. Once again, letting you ignore an entire modifier. That is 3 whole Eclipse modifiers completely ignored by grabbing a single item. But I'm not done yet. Eclipse 8 is generally considered the hardest modifier. Permanent damage is nothing to laugh at, and although Transcendence doesn't ignore this modifier like the other 3, it does make this modifier significantly easier. By granting you a 50% health boost, you now have far more HP to work with, meaning you can take on more of the curse from permanent damage before it becomes a serious problem. And considering the fact that this more health comes with the quote-unquote negative of being able to ignore 3 entire other modifiers and an entire class of items, using Transcendence in Eclipse is a no-brainer. It completely trivializes the experience of the most difficult challenge in vanilla Risk of Rain 2. Now, I wish that's all I could say, but there is even more to this item that makes it so overpowered. Yeah, Transcendence already has anti-synergy with nearly 30 items, but the few items it does synergize with, it synergizes really well with. You would think PSG would be a good item for it, but that's actually not the case, as PSG's bonus scales off of base health and not the boosted health. But every other item that gives you more health does receive the Transcendence bonus. Bison Steaks now give 38 health instead of 25, Infusions give 150 instead of 100, and even the new Seared Steak item not only gives you 75% health, but the additional 5% maximum health per stack also gets amplified. But those bonuses are nowhere near as ridiculous as the other food items. Hearty Stew increases your regeneration, and when you're at full health, your regeneration is added to your base damage. But this full health requirement ignores shields completely, so picking up a Hearty Stew with Transcendence is just an increase to your base damage. Same can be said for the Ultimate Meal. The Ultimate Meal is double the effectiveness of a Clover, but you need to be at full health for that to play an effect. But with Transcendence, you can just get an objectively better Clover without needing to worry about the item's mechanic. And I haven't even gotten to Plasma Shrimp or Kinetic Dampener yet. Shrimp fires as long as you have a shield, and because you always have a shield, you will always be firing off shrimp. Kinetic Dampener, on the other hand, loses its explosion effect, but as the item grants you armor while you have shield, you essentially get permanent armor. A single Kinetic Dampener gives you about a 23% reduction to all damage, and only 3 of them are needed to get your damage reduced by nearly half. Considering the fact that Transcendence also gives you 50% more health, this combo makes you insanely tanky, while dealing consistent damage due to shrimp. This is easily the strongest item combo in the entire game. But what truly makes Transcendence busted is how easy it is to get. Transcendence is a lunar item, meaning you can buy it with lunar coins in the bazaar. You can consistently get this item before stage 2 in basically every run. It is not a legendary item you need from a chest or a rare boss drop, it's something you can just buy. Now obviously if you have cheated in lunar coins, it's trivial to get. And considering the fact that about 90% of the player base is on PC, where cheated in lunar coins is common, acquiring this item really isn't an issue. But what if you don't have cheated in lunar coins? Well, you can still go to the bazaar for just 1 coin and check the 5 items in stock. Repeat this every stage and it's fairly likely that you'll find it before stage 4. You can check 5 items every time, and given the fact that there are only about 24 lunars in the game, if you have them all unlocked, you'll usually get it within 5 checks or less. Now, sometimes you are really unlucky, but in the vast majority of runs, it's not a really hard item to find, and is significantly easier than any specific legendary or boss item. But what about those who do cheat in lunar coins? Well, you'll be happy to know that this item stacks incredibly well. Every stack after your first gives you another 25% maximum health, with no downside at all. Having only 3 of these is double your maximum health. 5 of them, and you're looking at 150% more HP, and that number just gets higher and higher. There is no point in not stacking this item unless if you are purposefully trying to avoid being overpowered. With all of these positives, there are bound to be a few negatives, and the negatives that Transcendence have are extremely manageable. Look, 9 seconds to fully heal can be an issue for some, and if you're new at the game, it may seem like a genuinely balanced trade-off. But as you get more and more experience with the game, you'll quickly learn that it's a non-issue. One of the reasons why Safer Spaces is considered so strong is because it negates damage once every 14 seconds, and most players are able to avoid taking damage for 14 seconds. As you play the game more and more and get better at dodging, you'll learn why Safer Spaces is so good, and Transcendence is basically the same thing, but with a 9-second cooldown, plus all the previously mentioned buffs. Essentially, most players can consistently avoid damage for the 9 seconds Transcendence takes. And obviously, getting Safer Spaces on top of Transcendence basically gives you God mode as long as you're doing the most basic form of dodging. The other negative is a little more significant, and that's the fact that this item actually doesn't really work on 2 of the 19 survivors. 3 if you're grasping at straws. Rex and False Sun both have kits that heavily revolve around HP, and by removing that, you're kind of removing their entire kits. Now you can play Rex with the non-plant skills that don't drain HP, and honestly, although those skills do less damage, this actually makes E8 Rex rather easy. False Sun, on the other hand, loses his growth mechanic, but he's already so powerful that losing his passive ability really doesn't make him bad at all. And even with Transcendence, he's still a force to be reckoned with. That third one that I mentioned was Bungus Engineer, as healing items do become useless. But if you do mobile turrets, or heck, don't find Bungus, then Transcendence does help a bunch, especially with Shrimp and Dampener. So what's the big TLDR? Well, Transcendence is certainly one of, if not the strongest and most game-breaking item there is. You can ignore nearly half of the Eclipse modifiers, convert almost every healing item into damage and movement items, and trivialize every run you have by grabbing one or more of these. Transcendence has a very small number of unique synergies while completely butchering countless more. And in a game where so many items have unique synergies with one another, Transcendence feels extremely out of place. It's the most poorly designed item in the entire game, and wields a far too game-breaking effect behind it. So how would you balance Transcendence? Well, I think I came up with a cool idea that keeps a lot of the charm of the item without making it too strong. Gain a shield equal to 20% plus 5% per stack of your maximum health, and double the shield gained from all shield-based items. But reduce healing by 50%, minus 50% per stack. This lets Transcendence still give the player a shield and improve the effectiveness of other shield-based items, honing more in on that synergy, making PSG give something like 16% shield instead of 8. But because we're not converting our entire HP bar into shield, the minus 50% healing is actually a proper negative. Now this also doesn't mean picking up 2 Transcendences completely removes your healing or anything. Instead it would function kind of like the Eclipse modifier, which just simply reduces the effect of healing items. Honestly, I like this change. It fixes a lot of the issues that Transcendence has, especially in Eclipse, and makes the item feel a lot more unique than just simply making all your health shield. Or, you know, they could just fix all the buggy interactions Transcendence has. Also, I'm interested to see what you guys think. If you have any ideas on how you'd balance Transcendence, let me know down below. And before we end things off here, obviously I want to make this little disclaimer. If you like using Transcendence, if you like going to the bazaar and grabbing it every run, or doing the synergies that it has, then there's nothing wrong with that. You don't need to stop using this item, but I just think for the sake of discussions, especially when it comes to the power of characters, ignoring items like Transcendence makes for a far more unique and healthy discussion. I mean, Transcendence isn't the only game-breaking lunar there is. We still have Gesture of the Drowned, Tonic, and Long-Standing Solitude to talk about. But I'll save those for another video. I hope you learned something new here. And if you liked what you saw and want to see more Risk of Rain content, then make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.